So I'm bringing a small story to the table today, but one that I think is sort of indicative of the way things are moving and how quickly they are. So China's piloting another sort of program with a digital yuan about 60 miles southwest of Beijing in a city there, and they're paying workers' wages on-chain with it, particularly builders. I thought that was interesting because China's obviously been doing a lot of experimentation with this, but here's the thing too, is they're actually doing experimentation with it and not just having hearing after hearing or white paper after white paper around it. And they're doing it in a lot of different use cases. So this was one I thought was kind of neat in a sense where you're like giving this out as a wage to somebody who's, you know, in sort of menial labor, you're like building things. It's not sort of for an investment firm or something like this, or like a white collar worker, like it's money that's going to the people. So in that direction, I think it was curious, but I also more so think it's just one more data point to show that this thing is just marching on to the beat of its own drum and not really slowing down. But Will, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this one to start off.
Yeah, no, I disagree with you. This is a cool story. I think it was a great selection for the day. There's a lot to be told about how the CBDC market kind of works out. I think in general, like my larger perspective is it's going to be a nothing burger by then, like in 2-3 years. I think it has a lot of similarities with the blockchain, not Bitcoin kind of narrative that we saw 2-3 years ago. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter, and that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of important conversations on it need to be had around how these CBDCs work, because they kind of highlight all these privacy concerns and also how money evolves. So when we're looking at like Bitcoin in general, we like a lot of the aspects that Bitcoin brings to the table. The fact that it's censorship resistant, that anyone can open up a Bitcoin account and just use it. CBDCs kind of bring some of those other questions to the table, especially the way that China is looking and developing their own CBDC. They've already gone so far as to talk about being able to delete money out of people's accounts if you don't spend it quick enough, which is a pretty frightening idea.
That's
so
crazy.
In general, you're totally right that like there is a larger conversation that needs to happen around how CBDCs work. And in China, in general, they're doing that quite actively compared to Europe and the US, where we're just basically putting out white papers. But in China, they have a lot of different areas all around the country where they've already been doing this. They've been testing it for months now, even years at some point. And they have public blockchains that they're trying to plug in different ones like Ethereum and Polkadot into their own Chinese blockchain variant. So give it over to you, Naomi. But yeah, great selection for the day, Ben.
Yeah, I'll add that I am not at all excited about governments moving ahead fast to mandate yet another fiat currency. I love the private sector moving fast. I love innovation and all that, but I don't love mandates and I don't love coercion, which is what this is all about. As Will highlighted, there are just some terrifying things about this central bank digital currency, like the ability to delete money out of people's account if they're not spending it fast enough. There are lots of things like that. It's not an exciting prospect for me, and I'm glad that other governments are moving slowly in this and just putting out white papers. I think there's a great quote, like, just be grateful, you don't get all the government that you pay for. So I'm glad that other governments are not rushing ahead and putting out things that would lead to more mandates and most likely less privacy, because if we're judging by previous policies in terms of how banks are run and how our money can be transferred and all of these rules, I mean, I think central bank digital currencies are just going to be another way for money to be tracked and to erode individuals' right to financial privacy. So definitely not excited about any of that at all. We're looking at like things like in El Salvador with the mandate there that people have to accept Bitcoin. We've got this mandate here about central bank digital currencies. Like, there's just mandates all over the place. I love crypto because it gives people the choice, the freedom of a choice that they can, of their own volition, decide to use or not to use. Although we are seeing such momentum behind different countries around the world adopting different cryptocurrencies, I'm not excited when that momentum is coming from government mandates at all. But Ben, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point in looking at El Salvador in this too, because I want to zoom this out a little bit and look at the fact that we accuse China of authoritarianism, using CBDCs to that sort of end as a coercive mechanization of money that they can control ultimately. And I think that it's been really interesting watching Iran, watching North Korea, watching other countries dabble in crypto from a state perspective. And now we see El Salvador, which also does have some authoritarian tendencies, really diving into Bitcoin. And so I don't know how exactly this might happen, but I think it's a really interesting question to see. You see these two countries taking divergent paths, but I think that might have some similar interest around the control of their own citizenry. And so, when I'm thinking about Bitcoin and how that plugs into El Salvador, for example, because they're also moving quite quickly on this, I'm wondering about things like what might be the case when the sort of $100 million fund and bank fund that was set up to transfer that Bitcoin into US dollars, like how might they exert control there in some ways if they choose to do so, if this starts being disadvantageous for them. So I think these are parallel tracks, but we're seeing countries that have these tendencies dive into both CBDCs and crypto, and where they meet in terms of how they're trying to use them, I think is going to be a fascinating storyline.
I think, usage mandate aside, I think the open, like Bitcoin is an open network, right? Like there's no way that President Bukele in El Salvador could remove Bitcoin from a citizen's wallet should they choose to save it rather than spend it.
Unless it's a custodial wallet.
Well, that's a good point. Mm-hmm. So the devil is in the details on that. But but if we look at it sort of in abstraction, right, you have these open networks versus very closed and controlled networks. And the fact that we're seeing these things now kind of emerge, as you said, Ben, in parallel with some diversions, I think is going to be really interesting to watch out. It's really interesting to watch for as we see other countries either go down the path toward embracing open networks for digital currency, or choose to take the more like digital yuan controlled central bank digital currency approach. So it is really interesting the way I think that the El Salvador news heightens the conversations around CBDCs right now.
Yeah, and I'll add to that it really is a battle between physical cash and cryptos or digital monies right now, whether you're using custodial wallets with Bitcoin or whether you're using, a central bank digital currency, right? A lot of these places, people love cash. They love it because cash is the most anonymous way to transact. So when you have governments come in and mandating, well, you got to use our central bank digital currency, like you really start to eliminate the cash sector. And it's what governments all over the world are doing right now, putting bans, like in, I think, Italy and France, you've got a 1,000 euro cap on the amount that you can pay in a single transaction using cash. In Australia, it's like 7,500 USD. So, bans all over the world. And I think it's just going to escalate as we go forward.